Hello there. I'm speaking to you as Dark Shades today because this is one of these maybe self-development, relationship type things. And it's really, I decided to talk about why I'm single, why I prefer to be single, whether or not I remain single. And yeah, I thought I would talk about it because people make a lot of assumptions about people who are single, and I've never really thought about it. I really thought that being single was my choice. And I thought that, if I was in a relationship, if it didn't go well, no skin off of my nose, I'd move right along. What I realized, though, is that recently I'm dismissive avoidant. Now, if you're going by the technical terms and these clinical evaluations and studies these psychologists have done, they've put me in the bracket of dismissive avoidant. So when I started looking up the traits of a dismissive avoidant, I'm like, what the hell? I thought that the way I was behaving was just based on me wanting time to do my videos, me wanting space, and just basically respecting my autonomy and things that I like to do. So it never occurred to me that it was a psychological thing why I was single. And I wondered how many other people fell into that bracket. I mean, they do have, okay, I happen to be, according to the professionals, a dismissive avoidant. But they also have fearful avoidant. They also have insecure attachment. They also have secure attachment. And they come up with all of these phrases to categorize why people behave in a certain way. Now, what they're saying is that because, as you know, for those who follow me, I was raised in a foster home for the primary years of my life, the most important from the age of 4 till about 8. Kind of varies because I'm not quite sure. But yeah, so those fundamental years of my life, I was raised in a foster home. And even though the foster parents didn't treat me badly, my needs were dismissed because they couldn't pay attention to all of the children in the home. So what they tended to do was dismiss the needs of individual children. And we wasn't allowed to have preferential treatment. We wasn't allowed to sit on anybody's lap. The nanny wasn't allowed to hold us and hug us and give us nurturance. So, for those of us who went through that, we grew up believing that our needs weren't important, that it was a waste of time asking for our needs to be met because nobody would take any notice of them. And as I grew up, it was kind of reinforced, even though I didn't know it at the time, that my mother, because of her feelings of resentment and whatever was going on in her life, she wasn't nurturing. So she didn't acknowledge me, or if I said something that was more or less poo-pooed or dismissed, it wasn't taken on. So, and that, of course, went into my adolescent years. And so I reached a point where I didn't ask for what I needed. I grew up believing that it didn't matter. It didn't make any sense because if somebody needed something from me, they would just take it. And if I wanted something, it would be ignored. And that's how I grew up. Now, what it does also is that it forces people like me who are dismissive avoidants, it forces them to retreat. It forces us to isolate, to separate ourselves. And even if we have relationships, we can have relationships for a little while. And then what happens is we feel kind of not claustrophobic, but if it's getting too intimate, we push the person away. And so we end up, maybe in my case, if I'm in a relationship, I kind of get a bit nervous when a year is coming up, and I kind of think, I start thinking, this isn't right, that ain't right. And I find a way to get out of it. and I feel much safer on my own. And it's like a relief because I've got no one to depend on, no one to depend on me. I've got no one to disappoint me. But this is all subconscious. This isn't what I thought was happening. I thought I was making a conscious decision to be single. I didn't realize that I was pushing people away. And that doesn't have to just be romantic, that can even be my family. And also, what they say is that we can be quite cold and aloof because we've grown up not not having that warmth. And so it's our form of protection. So I just thought I'd preface this video with that background and then I'll read my notes. So what I've got here, people tend to make assumptions about single women. What type of women settle down in long-term relationships has nothing to do with looks, size. It has more to do with good choices, strong character, genuine personality, and a stable upbringing. Partners who have strong character and good personality are usually securely attached. What I mean by that is they had supportive parents, they felt loved, heard, understood, and their needs were met. And there was some kind of consistency which informed their adult choices. Someone like me, however, and there are many like me, who did not have the supportive parents, the consistency, and where love was conditional on how I behaved or what I said, I would be considered as insecurely attached. I really understood why I love being single. It is because I have a dismissive avoidant attachment. A dismissive avoidant attachment style comes when your parents or guardians dismiss your needs as a child. As a result, I grew up believing my needs were not important and therefore I never shared with my partner what they were. And when they were not met, I became resentful. People tell you to let go of the past. It's fine saying let go of the past, but unless you understand why you behave the way you do, you have to go back to the past in order to understand it. And then once you understand it, then you can let it go. But you can't just dismiss the past and say, oh, shove it under a rug. It doesn't work. The mistakes that you make in your life, like what I've done so far, is that I repeat the same behavior all the time. Soon as somebody gets too close, I push them away. And I think to myself, I just prefer to be on my own. So until recently, I thought I was a great woman in a relationship. And indeed, I was to a degree. But if my partner was inconsistent and unreliable, I did not feel safe and I did not feel protected. And that was important to me, although I didn't know it at the time, because there are certain things that trigger a dismissive avoidant. And untrustworthiness, unreliability, inconsistency, lack of acts of service, lack of validation, all of those things trigger a dismissive avoidant and makes them retreat and go into their shell and makes them shut off completely. So I did not see the value of a relationship if it was reinforcing to me that my partner was not present for me, did not support me or meet my needs. My behaviour in relationships must have been confusing for my partner, who thought they had it in the bag when only to find out that they didn't. People who are dismissive avoidant, male or female, need consistency, good communication, need to feel listened to, supported, understood. They need their alone time, which is very important. They need to be unconditionally accepted because they tend to be criticized as young people. What happened is they ended up criticizing themselves. And even though somebody will kind of validate them, it's more or less like they don't believe it because they've had this conditioning of all this criticism that now it's difficult to kind of get rid of. But as once they're aware of it, they can actually understand what is going on and they can actually reject the old behavior and adopt a new pattern of behaviors. So it is reversible. It can be deactivated. So, yes, so they are hurt by harsh criticism and judgment. Um, they need predictability. They need to feel safe. They need to be validated and affirmed. And their love language is acts of service. Acts of service is like somebody doing something for you. That is what a dismissive avoidant would like to see. And that is how they feel loved. So I preferred to be single up until recently because I was not aware of the impact my childhood had on me as an adult. I didn't let my needs be known, so my partner would not know what was important to me. And I didn't realise that when I felt unsafe and unheard, that was a deal breaker. Living alone was a cop-out. It was a way to avoid being disappointed and hurt. We need to be tolerant and accepting of other people's backgrounds and situations. So, why am I single? I get fearful when someone gets too close. Are they going to take my freedom away? And I guess it's been exacerbated by, my marriage, having somebody who was so possessive, and I guess my freedom was taken away. So I guess even though I'm an adult and I'm in control of my freedom, somewhere in my deep subconscious, it equates relationships with taking away my freedom. And so I try to avoid them. Or if somebody starts making too many demands on me, I'm like, uh-oh, this is getting a bit too much. I've got to skip ship. It's a bit like The Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts. I've got difficulty trusting someone can make me happy, but there again, as you grow older, as I now realise, I have the capacity to make myself happy. So I'm not reliant on anyone to make me happy. It's a bonus if they do. I never saw my parents argue, which confirmed an idealistic view of relationships. My guardians unintentionally dismissed my needs, so I grew up believing my needs were not important. And if they were not important, why share them? Why have a partner? This was my mindset. So what I told myself was I prefer to be single. I believe a relationship will take something away from me. Too much to compromise. Not enough space. I value self-sufficiency. And one thing with dismissive avoidance is that because they're self-sufficient, they also need somebody who's also self-sufficient. I told myself that people are not reliable. They will not be around when I need them. They will not fulfill my needs. That I can self-soothe. I can look after myself and nurture myself. I enjoy my alone time. And I have difficulty asking for help, so why bother? Fear intimacy, I've already said that. So I inadvertently chose people who were emotionally unavailable and couldn't satisfy my emotional needs. I confused romance with relationships. Romance is temporary and relationships take commitment. When some men see independent women, they tend to think, what can I do for her? The perception is that men can't do anything for an independent or self-sufficient woman, but they can listen. They can give her ideas, they can nurture her, they can love her, they can fix things, and they can have the elements that are missing, and they can look after themselves. And the thing is that when a lot of men see independent women, they're like, oh, she's got everything, she can do everything herself. What does she need me for? She hasn't got everything. She can't do everything by herself. And it's about that person looking to see what is missing. How can I support that person? There are always ways, and I think that is a challenge for a lot of men, and it's also a challenge for a lot of women when they're thinking, "What can a man do for me?" And a man is thinking, "What can I do for her?" And then the woman is thinking, "What can I do for him?" And it's kind of like a battle when it doesn't need to be. Very, very simple. You find out each other's needs and you try to support them. Women, regardless of how independent, are not good at everything. That's what I just said. A confident man will know how to compliment her. When I say compliment, I don't mean as in telling compliments. I mean as gelling and being a positive companion. It was hard for me to be grateful for a relationship. It was hard work. I had an unrealistic view of relationships. And like I said, I've already explained what dismissive avoidant is. But I better read this last bit. Dismissive avoidance. They believe it is not safe to be vulnerable, which is reinforced when they find themselves in vulnerable situations or when they ask for something and it is dismissed or ignored. They tend to think rather than feel. They are logical rather than vulnerable. They would disassociate in order to cope with situations. They come over as aloof and cold. They find it difficult to manage their emotions. They show compassion for others, but little compassion for themselves. And they require autonomy. And I was thinking, when you think about, I know these are kind of professionals and psychologists and stuff, but when you think about how people like me who like being on their own and they actually enjoy it and I enjoy my own company, it makes it much easier for me. Like when we had COVID and people were in lockdown, it wouldn't affect me the same as somebody who was on, maybe had an insecure attachment and needed somebody. They needed validation. They needed company. And I can understand that's why it tips some people over the edge on lockdown and some people not, depending on your upbringing, depending on what you've been through, depending on what kind of adverse childhood experiences you've had. And so I can imagine why some people can cope better than others. So I thought that was interesting because you do find some people, they were committing suicide, remember? During COVID, a lot of people couldn't cope with being on their own. And so, yeah, I thought that bit was interesting. So for me, it comes down to self-awareness and self-education. I need to let down my walls. I need to learn to ask for what I want. I need to get curious about other people. I need to learn to validate my emotions. My emotions are important. My needs are important. I need to learn to ask for help, even though it's risky and I can get rejected. I need to not push partners away. I need to be more available, make myself more available. I need to stop overthinking and clarify instead. And this applies to any dismissive avoidant. Need to stop nitpicking as an excuse to end a relationship. Need to be grounded and grateful. Need to find healthy partners and healthy friends. And by that, it means people who are self-sufficient and who are securely attached and who could respond to my needs and those of a dismissive avoidant. So I think after saying all that, hopefully my current partner, who I feel is securely attached, I think we'll go the course. So that's all I've got to say for now. Bye-bye.